Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Selvi. I'm a Gmat Club moderator. First of all, I want to mention that today's session wraps up our MBA Spotlight Fair perfectly. We hope that you all were able to join our live sessions with top business schools and get great insight about their programs. If you've missed any of the sessions, don't worry. The videos are up on our YouTube channel, so feel free to go through them and check them out.
Thank you, Selby. That was a wonderful introduction. My name is Ankit Sureka, and I will be co-moderating this panel for our viewers today. On the panel, we have some amazing people, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Why don't you go first, Claire?
Hi, thank you first of all for having me. I think the Gmat Club is an amazing resource. I remember using it back in when I was, before I was an MBA candidate. So really happy to be here today. So just briefly, my name is Claire Meyer. As you can probably tell from my Midwestern twang, I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri in the US. Just before I got my MBA, I was actually working in higher education. So I was working in a research center on financial literacy at the George Washington University. And then I got my MBA from Bocconi, as you can see in my title, in Milan, Italy. And then right now I'm based out of Milan, Italy, also at a small consulting firm called Business Performance Institute. So thank you again for having me today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Gray. I'm moved around a lot as a kid, but I graduated high school in Alaska. So you can have random questions on that. I do want to reiterate, I was bald before I started to study the GMAT. So I promise it won't make you too stressed. I got my MBA in Rotterdam School of Management there in the Netherlands. My background is business development. I hadn't taken a math course since high school. So for those out there that are freaking out about the GMAT, I feel you. You will get through it. And right now, since my MBA, I co-own a digital marketing firm doing digital advertising called Gattaca Media.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Amisha. I was working at Udacity as a customer success manager before I started my MBA program. As you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from India, specifically Delhi. I just graduated from UC Riverside just this June. I concentrated in marketing and information systems. And right now I'm working as a product manager at Zendesk. Zendesk is a CRM platform. So interned with them, then got converted to a full-time position. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And also on the panel, we have Paul from Amerasia Consulting. Hi, Paul.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Well, you may have seen me from other GMAT Club presentations, such as how to get into any number of schools. But today, we're going to be covering, obviously, our three participants' journey. I'm going to be the person asking the question, so that should be pretty exciting. And hopefully we'll get a lot of good insight.
Fantastic.
All right, so I guess we'll just jump right into it. I'm going to start with this question, and we'll go in the same order that the introductions went. So first one, hope everyone's ready. Tell us a bit about your application journey. How many schools did you apply to and why?
Yes, good question. So I should also clarify. So I graduated in December 2019 from Bocconi. I would say I started the MBA kind of process about a year before I intended to start school. So probably the fall of 2017, I really started looking. And I spent really that solid year researching schools, taking the very painful GMAT, as Ryan mentioned. It was a very long and in-depth process. Ultimately, I only applied to 2. So I really wanted to get back to Europe. I applied to Bocconi, obviously, and then also Oxford. I was very interested in their 1+1 program to do a combination of business and then higher education. Ultimately, Bocconi made a very attractive offer, and I was really excited about that and interested in leveraging my Italian. So that's where I ended up.
Got it. We have similar journeys. So for me, I lived in Europe as a kid. I lived in the Netherlands for about 5 years, from basically 5th grade to 9th grade in high school. And I always wanted to come back. And in college, I met my wife and got married, and we kind of like tested the waters. And so we went to the Netherlands, and it was kind of like a, hey, could we live here kind of thing. and she loved it. And weird, serendipitously, I reached out to Rotterdam School of Management and said, look, this is really weird, but I'm vacationing here. I can only be there on a Saturday. Is there any chance I could just kind of walk around and talk to somebody? And they said, well, we do 4 like in-house meetings a year where we invite people to come and see. And that's one of the 4. So I was like, well, that's creepy. So I got to meet everyone, but I got cold feet. Like a lot of people, I'm sure they've gone through it. They say, well, I want to get an MBA. And that was around 2016, 2017. And then I said, maybe down the road. And then I made a very poor choice, which was in August of 2018. I decided, yeah, I'm serious. I do want to get my MBA degree. Contacted Rotterdam School of Management, and they said, well, October is our last application process for a school that starts in January. It's one of the schools that their whole thing starts in January. Anyways, I reached out and I hadn't taken the Gmat yet. I'd studied multiple times. I'd gone through the Magoosh, the Gmat Club, all this stuff, but I never really pulled the trigger. And I was like, okay, well, this is dumb, but let's try it. And so basically for 2 months, 6 days a week for 5 hours every day, I studied, took the test, and then got accepted. And then I had to move in 2-3 months, move to Europe and sell a bunch of stuff. And it was crazy. So I wouldn't recommend my process. I recommend being like studious and take your time. And so that was obviously a whole other stress level that if I had any hair left, I would have lost it. But really it was a testament to me on working with these, the career coaches and the recruiters of these universities. They were very flexible and understanding because I had that relationship early on. I had those conversations. They knew who I was. It like so many times, it's the same thing with applying for resumes, right? If you're just applying for random jobs and you're not really communicating with the people first, you're never going to get the job. And that's the same thing with these application processes. These MBA schools, they're people first. So I, highly recommend, I'm sure this has been talked about on a lot of these panels, but highly recommend having these conversations with these recruiters early on because then they can be much more flexible.
Very good. Very good.
For me, I went through the entire process of getting inspired, then applying, and then meeting these school representatives. So I was working at Udacity, always wanted to get into product management. Every product manager at Udacity had an MBA. So obviously, I was like, okay, I should just get my MBA if I want to get into product management. Not true, though, but this is what I did. I always wanted to be in California because I wanted to get into the tech industry. Felt like if I'm going to graduate in California, it'll be easier to get into Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley dream, as all of you know. So selected a couple of universities within California. The UC system is very well recognized in India, US as well, applied to a couple of UCs, got into UCR, and yeah, rest is history. But it was a proper process of giving the painful GMAT, getting the recommendation letters in place, then applying and meeting Tamra, who is basically the associate director of UCR, meeting her in India. She was the one who talked me through how the professors are, how the community is, and yeah, it was a pretty straightforward process.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And so the next question I have is, well, for everyone, but starting with Claire, you ended up going from, I guess, the Lou, right, St. Louis, over to Italy. Quite, it seems, some could look at that as without knowing all of your background, a little bit of a fish out of water, so to speak. Of what, out of all the great and illustrious programs in the States and in Europe, especially given your background, which I believe you mentioned was in education, what was it about, besides the Italian factor, right, which I can appreciate, what was it specifically that drew you to that program?
Bocconi. Really good question, Paul. First of all, thank you for calling St. Louis the Lou. That you must know a thing or two about St. Louis to call it the Lou. Very impressive. So I think it is quite a leap, right? Going from the Midwest to Italy. I think one piece of my story I haven't shared that helps to kind of bridge the gap a little bit is that right after high school, I was actually an exchange student in Sardinia. So I was a Rotary Youth exchange student straight out of high school at 18. And I actually ended up getting my undergrad in Spain. So I kind of had a past history of, let's say, international education. And I did speak Italian, so I wanted to be able to leverage that. In terms of where I was working in education, as I said, I was working at GW. So I was working at a research center on financial literacy, and it was led by this powerhouse female Italian economist who had gone to Bocconi. So, I spoke Italian. I wanted to be in Italy. I wanted to be in Europe. And this woman who I was very inspired by, I remained very inspired by, had gone to Bocconi for her undergrad. So I knew it was a prestigious program. I knew in Italy, it's kind of the go-to MBA. So that's really, for me, kind of all stars aligned in that direction, I would say. And, I think the more I learned about the program, I did, like Ryan, I went on campus, I visited. I had this feeling of like really that kind of small program, very tailored, kind of intimate setting that I really, really appreciated. And I felt like I would do well in. And then I guess just final comment, I think probably similar, to other MBA programs abroad, I think it is just such a unique opportunity to get to interact with so many international people when you do an international MBA. So that was another big thing that kind of led me back overseas.
Right on. Thank you. So Ryan, similar question. I know you did provide a lot of more of the personal background reasons as to why, Netherlands, Europe, Rotterdam, but with respect to the school itself, I'm not complete, to be honest, full disclosure, not completely familiar with all of the MBA programs, in Rotterdam, but this specific one, there's something that the program contained that really attracted you other than, the obvious of location?
Yeah, good question. There are a couple factors in it. First is I'm a boring old white guy, and I was looking to diversify myself as much as possible. And I didn't want to do the cookie cutter thing of going to, classic story of you graduated from a university in your state, then you go to the MBA there right out of college, and there's a bunch of people that aren't very experienced, and they're supposed to kind of tell you what it's like to be in business management. So I really looked to other schools, and Rotterdam stood out because it's a one-year program, accelerated, seen exactly the same. I didn't want to be out of the workforce for too long. And I also I think the requirement is 5 years of experience, because I really wanted the value to be that my cohorts can bring their own experience, which is really important. And the international aspect. I believe Rotterdam School of Management, I'm sure it changes every year, but it's one of the most international schools in the world. It was 97% when I was there were not Dutch. Technically, there's one guy from Curacao, which technically is Dutch, so maybe it's like 94. But I really enjoyed that. So even the Dutch person felt like an international student. And something clever that I think they've never admitted this to me, but I think they did this purposely is Netherlands is a beautiful country. January is the worst time to be there. It's very dark, it's very cold, and it's a sucky time. And I think it's sort of like a boot camp style. They drop you in January with all these other people you don't know. Everyone's from a different country. Everyone feels fish out of water. So you have to get rid of all that pride, kind of like you have in high school or even undergraduate, where there's the cool kids, the jocks, that you get rid of all of that because you have to rely on each other. And so I really enjoyed that. Was a really appealing aspect to me is, for me, like one of the most valuable things of an MBA, which I'm sure we'll get into in the questions, is the alumni network. And for me to have a network that was worldwide in all these different countries, that was a really cool, appealing thing that I didn't want to turn down.
Right on. No, great. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Amisha, your turn. UC Riverside. What was it that, what is there? I should know this because I went to UCLA, but there's what, 7 schools in the UC system? What drew you specifically to Riverside? Beyond the wonderful weather, what took you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just what I've heard from a lot of people, that everybody wants to go to Stanford, Howard, and schools like that. But a lot of times the right fit for you might be a completely different school. The school which is probably not talked about in the first 5 or first 10 business schools. So for me, UC Riverside was one of those schools. At that point of time, when I spoke to some of the admissions representatives at UCR, they were speaking about how the professors have a very good focus on all the different students individually. There's like individual focus, and the class size is pretty small. So we only had about 40 students in each class, which meant that the professors could give us way more time during their office hours. UCR as a university is super diverse. So I literally had friends from Africa, Taiwan, China, Ghana, and even Italy. So it was just amazing to have friends from all over the country, all over the world, and then understand their cultures, understand how their thought process is. So that was also very important for me, because being an international student coming to the US, I wanted to meet as many different people as possible, because that's not something you get to do in India. And then we had 2 concentrations at UCR, information systems and marketing. That was something which I could not find in a lot of schools. So that also played a big part in choosing UCR.
Okay, wonderful. Now, based off of what everyone just said, I'm going to ad lib here with one of the questions, but kind of 2 things that came to mind. What is, obviously everyone is an international student, correct? What is it? I mean, was there anything that you felt like you struggled with because you were coming from the States or from India that you got there? Maybe you didn't realize that there wasn't any sun for 6 months out of the year, right? Or you shouldn't have brought your winter coat, or maybe you should have bought one, right? Was there anything that you felt was a bigger adjustment than you expected? And this could be, yes, the weather, or it could be, something you may have seen in the way things were taught at the school or in country X, and I know it's like a Baskin Robbins over at Erasmus, but was there anything that particularly surprised you, given your more, and I hate to, stereotype, but more of the American or Indian point of view when you get there?
Yeah, so for me, there were very little things which were super different. Say, for example, when you're walking on a street, you see a stranger, they would probably smile at you. They would probably say hello. Here in the US, does not happen in India at all. So I was at a grocery store and somebody just started talking to me, complete stranger. And I was like, excuse me, like, why are you talking to me? So that was like a huge surprise towards the start. Other than that, the classes here, it's more about understanding and then the practical application of the theory. In India, it's a lot about, learning everything. So like cramming it up and then writing your papers. So that was a little bit different. There's a lot of class discussions which happen in the US. In India, we don't know the concept of class discussions. Here, when I was giving my quantitative analysis exam, they gave me a rough cheat sheet of all the formulas. And I was like, what is happening in the US? That is like cheating. But no, it's about, you don't need to learn the formulas. You just need to know how to apply them. So, all these little differences, those were great. I love how everybody can be comfortable with expressing their diversity here in the States. There's no judgment. So yeah, all these tiny, tiny things played a huge part in changing how I think and being more accepting towards everyone.
Wow. Claire or Ryan?
Yeah, I can jump in. I'll jump in very quickly. I think Actually, I think oddly enough, being an American was kind of an advantage in this program, just because what I came to see, which I didn't realize before I started the MBA, which seems kind of obvious in retrospect, is that the MBA is really born in the US, right? So it's a US-based program. And I think there's still so much curriculum that is rooted in US business principles. Almost all of our case studies were about American companies, right? So I remember there was like a case study on JCPenney, and I was like, I know JCPenney, my mom loves JCPenney. And all of the Italians in the class are like, what is this what is this department store? So I think that was actually a big advantage. And I think if anything, doing it overseas made me kind of recognize American tendencies that I might not have otherwise. For example, I realized that sometimes Americans, they just like to speak up and participate in class for the sake of having something to say, even if it's not super valuable. And I myself am 100%, I have that issue as well. And I noticed other cultures are much more mindful about, how they interact, how they engage. So it did make me do a couple of double takes, in terms of how we approach situations.
Oh, cool. And of course, Mr. Gray.
Yeah. So no, I agree, Claire. You're spot on that. There's a lot of tendencies of, and I'm very much just loud and I say things even though it's not valuable. It's 100% true. One that really helped me is I'm trying to look for it while we're talking. I'll find the real name by the end of this, but I think it's called The Cultural Map. It was a book written by a professor. She's a professor at the MBA school in Paris. And she basically studied all the different cultures and how they handle certain situations. Before the MBA started, we were all part of a WhatsApp group, and someone in the group recommended that book. That was extremely helpful because it went through, how certain cultures deal with conflict. And you've got the extreme, which is sort of the Japanese culture, which, outright say it. It's more of a long form conversation. They're not as direct. And then what was ironic in the book is it talks about is Dutch people are extremely direct. They're the whole linear system. They give examples of like a secretary will tell off the CEO if he didn't throw away his coffee cup. Like everyone is treated like this level that, it can be a culture shock if you're not used to it. But those were it. A weird specific one is, and I'm sure Claire's going to nod her head on this one, is American English versus English. Putting the dot instead of the comma, or the spelling of color and different things, the program with an E at the end, like that still throws me off. Stuff like that was really a pain. But the way that I kind of jumped into it was everyone was international. And so I knew my weakness was finance and mathematics and accounting, which the first term at RSM is all on those. So it was very humbling. So I took the approach of, well, I'm the native English speaker for our group, so I'll do the editing of the paper. Find your strength when you get in there, whatever it is, and really know what you're good at and know what you're not good at, and don't think you have to kind of puff up and say like, oh, I'm good, pretend to be something you're not. And that was really helpful. When we did that as a group, it was much more effective because I was more comfortable and not as stressed because I knew what I was good at and what I wasn't. And then you can rely on everyone else. But yeah, it's just being open and honest of what you're good at and what you're not. And you'll make it through the terms, I promise.
Awesome. So I believe Selby might have a question. Selby?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys, could you highlight a favorite experience you had during your MBA program? We can start with Anisha.
Yeah, that's a tough one because
I know.
Many amazing memories at UCR. So picking one is like, I'm thinking, which one?
Anisha still can't get past the grocery store incident.
I can't.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I was like, am I in trouble? Like, why are you talking to me? Yeah. So for me, I did an internship at UCR with their admissions team. And during that internship, I was just trying to create a virtual program so that we can retain the number of admitted students. And just the idea of thinking through the entire program, conceptualizing it, getting buy-in from the stakeholders, and then executing it, that was like a huge success for me as an international student and also for UCR because the numbers were great after that particular program. So everybody appreciated me a lot. They wrote an article for me. They also created a video for me where it was basically about day in the life of Amisha Sharma. So it was like a lot of popularity and it was like a lot of, glam stuff. So I really, really like that memory because I felt like I could create a change. I could do something at an American university, which I had never even thought I would be able to do. So yeah, that would be my favorite memory.
Nice. What about you, Claire?
I think I will actually call out the Kickoff week, which might be, it's kind of quintessentially Italian. So I felt like it's fair to call this one out. So during the Kickoff week, I think I realized a couple of things. So the Kickoff week is like a mix of academic in terms of like learning the rules of the program, learning about the grading, learning about the structure. You meet your group and then you have a bunch of social activities. And the social activities we did were like, we literally went to a winery, a Berlucchi winery. We did a cooking class all together and then we got to eat the meal together. And I think when I think back to that week, I think I felt like three realizations. One is I realized, this is a very Italian program. It was just like full of good food and everything. And that was fantastic. Two, I think I had this feeling like this is going to be a really like interesting and challenging experience. So I met my group for the first time and I had someone from Iran, someone from Italy, someone from Greece, myself, someone from India. And we had started already working on our first case. And I was like, this is not, it's not always smooth sailing. And I think I got a glimpse of, on the one hand, how international the program would be, on the other hand, the level of challenge. And then I think third, I just realized that week, like, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's like I had spent so much time pre-MBA understanding the different curriculums and how long is this program? How long is this program? What GMAT should I be shooting for? I was so like focused on the specifics of the program that I didn't even think like this is a group of self-selecting people that want to go abroad, that want to challenge themselves, that want to improve themselves. It's a super young international group and it was just so much fun, and I think that really only hit me when I met everybody for the first time.
Claire, how are you not 1,000 pounds from eating all that pasta?
It took a lot
That's
of self-moderation. That's another thing I learned is self-control, I guess, because there was at the winery visit, there was just like mounds of cheese, and that is my kryptonite. So I'm not gonna. That was definitely challenging. I'll tell you that.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about
now
you,
that I
Ryan?
made my pasta joke. Yeah, so I'm going to cheat. There's two parts. One is fun and one is like actually MBA related. So at the MBA school, they have a sailing trip they do every year that you can sign up for. It was extra additional cost. For those that have kids and are thinking about MBA, we went to the MBA with my son, who was 3 at the time. And then my wife was pregnant during the MBA school. And so we went sailing the summer in Italy off the oh gosh, you're going to be mad at me, Claire, because I don't remember the name of it, but it's the bottom boot portion. There's a set of islands above, and one of them is like an actual active volcano. Anyways, we went sailing for a week there, and it was kind of funny because a lot of my cohorts weren't like used to. A lot of them didn't have kids, and so they were really paranoid. My wife was like 4 months pregnant at the time, and they're really paranoid. Like, is she okay? Is everything fine? And my wife's like, this is my second kid. It's no big deal. But tons of fun. It was a good opportunity because what they did there is the sailing trip was for the full-time MBA students, as well as the executive MBA, as well as alumni from 1 or 2 of those. And so it was just this awesome experience to be with all these other people and get to know them. So that was really great. And then the other portion was at RSM, they do for a month and a half, all you're doing is working on a consultancy project. You have a real life client, and you and your group try to solve a particular problem. So there's no courses during the time. You meet with a advisor who kind of helps you create this sort of consultancy package at the end for this group to solve that problem. We had Medline. They're a big international medical device shipping company. And that was a ton of fun. So yeah, just those experiences. To me, the most valuable for the MBA is I'm not going to remember what was taught in each class. I'm going to remember the case studies and everything, but the actual lectures I won't. I'm going to remember the experience of the people around me and that bond and that learning from like anytime, they talk and say, what is it like to fire someone? And someone raises their hand and goes, look, I got a message that I had to fire 50 people and it sucked. And here's what I did. And here's what I learned. And so that was to me, the most valuable of the MBA is that cohort and that group. And so any experience where you got to kind of mingle with them was super valuable.
Right on, right? Very good. So follow-up question here. I don't know how appropriate this question is, but I just thought, well, why not ask it? So I'm following up on something in particular Claire said, but this is a question for everybody. But Claire, you mentioned being in a classroom with someone from Iran, right? And it kind of made me think and come up with this question, which is basically, with everything kind of going on and, we don't need to get into specifics, but with everything going on in America and even the world, what role do you feel like politics played in a lot of the discussion in the classroom? A lot of people can have misconceptions about other cultures, countries, people from the States or Iran or wherever, right? But was that a significant part of the dialogue or projects or discussions in class at all?
I'll jump in, please. Ryan, Amisha, jump in as well, please. This is a tricky question. I think it was a mixed bag in the sense, like, I think that my most vivid memories of things like that coming into play were more offline, not necessarily in group discussion. So like Ryan, we also had a whole group WhatsApp group, right? So there's like 100 people in there. And I remember when we very first started off, someone from the group had sent kind of like a joke, they perceived it as a joke, but it touched on another culture. It touched on, the age of there was just a couple of things that they touched on that some people found sensitive. And an American was like, I feel like this is completely inappropriate, and called it out and felt like, and you could just see this live, like, why is this person making such a big deal? And the other person's like, how could this person not be more aware? And I think in that moment, it was like week one, almost day one, I think there's this realization of like, we have a super international group here, and we have to be very sensitive about how we're communicating things in a way that you're maybe not going to have that level of sensitivity when you're within your own culture, right? So that's one experience that sticks out in mind. And then, yeah, like I would say in classes, I don't remember politics itself directly coming up, but I remember, again, there's always the question of like, I wouldn't have worded it like this, or I would have been less direct about this, or I think that there's just a very big mix of styles, and you kind of learn to be a little bit tighter in how you communicate.
Yeah, no, sorry. Amisha, do you mind if I? First thing for me, I was surprised. Like, again, this is the ignorance of, America. We're such a bubble. We just focus so much on ourselves. I was like blown away by how often Donald Trump was brought up, and then looked to me like I was like offended, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, it was super funny that way, where they like were worried when things would be brought up, and so to kind of show like, oh, like I'm fine with that. It's not a big deal. That was really funny to see. And then what was interesting was eye-opening to me. We had a similar situation where, to not get into details, one country, a group of students from one country were celebrating their country's like independence or something. And the other country, a country nearby, the students were like, I would love to go, but I can't be there because if any photos are released of me being there, showing, it could seem like I'm supporting it. So it's interesting stuff that when you're in your own country, you don't think about. And so that was really eye-opening of the answer to all we know this of dealing with international issues is the more you get to know the other person, the more you realize the human behind things, all that stuff doesn't matter. And we had a similar situation where we had someone from Iran that I honestly had never met anybody from Iran before. He was awesome. And it was an opportunity where, I tried to make it very clear to him that I don't care about our country. Like every once in a while you bring up, he was like, oh, our country's at it again or whatever. And was so cool to see, the answer to all of these issues of concerns or fears. If you get to know those people, all of that goes away. And that's what made the MBA so valuable is I got to really meet, like in one group, it would be myself, a Canadian, a Russian, an Indonesian, and a Pakistani. And it's like work together. And it's like, when in the world have these like countries? And so it just is such an awesome experience. So that stuff comes up, but it's really cool to see that what a lot of times our countries bicker about stupid politics and stuff that's a waste of time. When you get to the human side, it doesn't matter. And that's what was so great to see is, find more experiences to mingle with those kind of people is the best.
Wow. Great insight, Ryan. Amisha, I think you're on mute, by the way.
Oh, sorry about that. It did come up during one of our class discussions. So I remember that at that point of time, India and Pakistan had something going on. And I had a Pakistani American in my class at that point of time. And some question came up and she had her own opinion about the entire issue. I feel like that just helped me be more accepting of other people's opinions. I mean, not necessarily I agree with that, but at the same time, I am at least, open to listening to other people's opinions and not reacting to it. So these things do come up. Everybody has different opinions about different political situations going on. And especially something as sensitive as an India-Pakistan issue was like pretty huge at that point of time. But yeah, we handled it pretty well. So all good.
Yeah, and one last thing, sorry, real quick,
Sure.
that I find interesting too with all of these issues that come up. Oh my gosh, just had a brain fart. What was I going to say? I don't remember now. But yeah, sorry. Just in about it, a value of hearing those opinions and knowing that it's okay. Oh, this is what I was going to say. Knowing that it's okay that we don't agree. It's a good test for working at a big business. When you're working for a company, there's so much internal politics of who knows who, and that person's related to so-and-so. And for you to have the emotional intelligence to not let that bug you, like there's a part of that Amisha could have stood up and yelled and no, that's not what I believe. But no, to have the emotional intelligence to go like, look, I may not agree, but to hear the person out, that's going to help you immensely in moving up in a company, because those kind of people are rewarded is those that can kind of control and read the room basically.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's a great point. By the way, when I was in business school, that's when the States invaded Iraq, and boy, was that like kicking over a hornet's nest in class. That was exciting to say the least. Anyway, so okay, let's move on to talk about JOBs, right? Jobs. And as a international student, I think it's safe to say that the onus is on you a little bit more to get out there and pound the pavement and all this stuff, right? And I think almost any business school person would say, or any business school student would say, the Career Center may set it up, but you still have to knock it down. So, and to me, with international students, you may be under the gun a little bit more, have a lot more pressure to try to source that opportunity. So, this is kind of a multi-part question, but the first part is, did you know going into, Irvine or Erasmus or Bocconi, that you were able or kind of able to get the job that you now have? Or did you have some semblance for, this is how I was going to work with the admissions committee? And one of the reasons I ask is because I've, I guess, worked with a lot of clients get in these business schools, and they almost never think about the efficacy or the effectiveness of career services before they go. And then there's kind of this oh shit moment, I think, when they get in there with respect to I guess recruiting. But anyway, I've said enough. Claire, I guess you want to start off?
Yeah, I can start off. I think it's a good question. I think one thing I will say about the MBA compared to maybe other masters is I think it's actually shocking how great of a pipeline the MBA can be, right? Like, I think that there's not a lot of other master's programs that are in some ways designed in a way that puts so much emphasis on the outcome, right? And they really work to foster those relationships with employers. I think, Paul, just to echo what you were saying, for me, at the end of the day, career service, I think we were 100 at Bocconi, and maybe there was 6 or 7 career service. So that's already quite a good ratio. But I agree. Like, I think they can really tee it up. They can form the relationships, but ultimately you have to be the one who's finding out like what you really want, right? What you really want out of the program so that you can tailor your applications and you can really make sure that the next step is one that fits you well. But then 2, really like going after it, right? Doing the case studies, submitting the applications, doing the case practice. So I think it is, it's important that everyone takes it on their own responsibility to pursue things, right? Once they're in the MBA. I think for me, I literally went in with the mindset, like, I had been working in higher education before. I went in being like, basically, I wanted to get back to Europe. I had already taught English in Europe before. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to, get into the business world. So I was kind of like, if I get a job that is like as good of pay as I'm making now, but it's in Europe, like, great success, like, I had never guessed that I would start working for Anheuser-Busch InBev. That was my first job straight out of the MBA in their global procurement office in Switzerland. Just totally different world. Like, I had, even though I'm from St. Louis, I had never thought that Anheuser-Busch was going to be located over in Europe. I had never thought about going into procurement. I had never thought about, that whole world, right? So I think that, that's another big benefit of the MBA is I think you're in kind of tunnel vision a little bit in undergrad. It's like you're hearing your dad's friend is a lawyer, so that could be cool, or your mom works at Pepsi or something, so about things just very like from a very minimal point of view. And I think the MBA really gives you exposure and opens up your vantage point. And I think that's just a huge asset of the MBA, right? And then I do think, just final comment, I know I have a lot of comments on this topic. I think final comment is, when you're an MBA student and when you're a student in general, you have like a special pass of being able to basically connect with a huge group of people, right? On LinkedIn, you can reach out and be like, thank you, Ryan, for the hands up. You can reach out and be like, hey, I'm an MBA student at Bocconi. I see you went to Bocconi. I see you're an American. I see you're working at this company in Italy. I would love to hear about your path in a way that would be really weird if me as just like a quote unquote regular employee now would do, right? So I would really use that to your advantage, both before you go into the MBA and then when you're in the MBA.
Right on. Thank you.
Yep.
Amisha or Ryan?
Yeah, I have so much to say on this. First of all, it was a huge culture shock because in India, if you're a student, companies are going to come to your campus with the mindset that they're going to recruit from the campus. So they're going to come, give you an exam, you do the exam, then if you pass that exam, they're going to interview you and all of that process. In the US, it doesn't work like that. So companies are going to come to your university just to introduce themselves and probably answer some of the questions, and more so just to network with you. After that, how you carry forward that relationship is on you. How you continue your communication with them, communication with the recruiter is on you. So there's a lot which goes into that. And as an international student, you only have 90 days to search for a job. So that adds to the pressure, that adds to the complexity. So I think I was 6 months away from my graduation and I was getting that anxiety that, oh my gosh, I'm going to graduate. I'm only going to have 90 days to find a job. I have to start my job search process. But now I feel like I'm living my dream. I always wanted to work in San Francisco in a tech company as a product manager. So everything panned out for good. And definitely UCR's career services played a huge role in that because first of all, they help me understand how recruitment even works in the US, then how to network. Because Indians, I mean, we are not taught networking skills in school, but US would teach you networking skills in universities. So career services did a great job with that. Check the resume, LinkedIn profile. Also, there's something called elevator pitch, which I had never heard of before.
Really?
So that is something which also played a huge role in all those, networking events which we were invited in. Other than that, I think I would just say, just stay positive. Don't think of the visa issues too much and work with your career center and network as much as possible, because all the interviews I got were only because I was referred to those companies.
Oh, wow.
Other than that, it's just so difficult to even get the first call from a company in the
Yeah.
US.
Were these
So,
alumni referrals that you're talking
they were actually professor referrals. So
Oh,
they
okay.
were way stronger in nature. And at the same time, they were like, hey, she's my top student. I really think she's going to be a great fit for your company. So I think she should get an interview. That's how I got Zendesk.
Wow. Okay. Nice work. Impressive. Ryan.
I got to be careful because I'm very love this topic, so I could talk forever about this. I made a conscious decision starting out that my goal was not to get the best grade. It was to network as much as possible, especially because the MBA there is only a year. I was like, I only got a year to figure this out. So the way that they structure the MBA there is the first term is extremely difficult. They do all the tough classes, your accountancy, your stats, which I still don't. All that stat class taught me was you need to hire a statistician. Don't do it yourself. But yeah, all those difficult classes were the first term. But after that, it sort of eases off and gives you that free time. And like Claire was mentioning, there's something magical about reaching out to someone in term 2 who's a former alumni. And all you say is exactly like Claire said is, I'm at the school that you were at. I see your job title. I want to know what it's like to be you. And you just send that out and the response rate is super high. Now, something positive about COVID that I didn't have is I had to do a lot of meeting at lunches and people in person. Now everyone's used to video calls. And so it's even easier now where I spent a big portion of my time reaching out to people regularly and just having those conversations. And through those conversations, human nature is you want to feel important as a human being. And someone can come to you and say, I'm looking for a job for such and such. Even if they only had one conversation with you, the mentality of, I want to show that I'm important, I know people, they'll recommend you even though you only had one conversation. It's amazing. Human nature is hilarious this way. And I find myself doing it even now today. I'm like, oh, I had one conversation with them. Like, yeah, sure, I recommend them, even though I don't know. And that's what it is. It's very much like who you know, not what you know. And then once you get to that position, like Amisha mentioned, like once you have the interview, that's on you. Like if you mess that up, then too bad. But getting that first meeting with people, it's really key to network. And so I went overboard. RSM could tell you stories on this. I actually made it a goal to interview every single one of my fellow students. And I did a 1-minute video of who they are, where they're from, and what they want to do post MBA. And I posted it on my LinkedIn every day for a lot of weeks. You could do the math. There's 140 students. It was a little insane. Again, if I had any hair left, it would be gone. But I made that point because I genuinely want to know who they were. And it was a way to help their network, help get them on LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn there are 2 social platforms where organic still matters. It's TikTok and LinkedIn. And that has been key. It's been key for me as a marketing agency now that I own. All of our clients have been referral based through LinkedIn and other sources. We don't do ads for ourselves. The same thing with job opportunities. They were all through getting to network people. So I could ramble forever. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn afterwards. I will give you all the tips of what I did networking wise, but spend that time early. Don't wait till the end. And yeah, really focus on be genuine. If you really want to learn something from someone, don't do it to check a box, really get to know them. And people can sense your genuineness, if that's even a word, and that can go a long way.
Maybe just one more comment to reinforce what Ryan was saying. I recently had a conversation with someone who's an Amazon recruiter for MBAs, and she basically said, honestly, Claire, there's the stack of resumes here, the referrals are at the top and everyone else is below, right? So I think at this point in the time, like it is really referrals are the name of the game. And it's also important, not just from a referral point of view, but from an information point of view, right? Like you can actually ask people, what do you hate about your job? What do you hate about your company? You know, like that's the best way to really find out what's happening internally.
Very good. So follow-up question, bit of a jump ball. So then, well, Ryan said something, you know, it's not who you know, or rather it's not what you know, it's who you know more of. So what it begs the question, at least in my mind, which is then how much of the actual classroom academic acumen or knowledge do you feel like you're using? And I know it varies based on what you do now for work, but do you feel like you're actually using, other than the network part and the relationship aspect, what you learned in class? And if so, what is it?
Okay, I can jump in.
Sure.
Feel free, anyone else to add here. I think it's a really valid question because then it's like, well, is this even about the academics, right? And I think in part it is, right? In part, 100% the network is key. When I think back about the MBA, I think about a couple of things. One is Excel. I knew Excel okay, but I think I got a lot better at Excel. Two to me was I did actually the financial concentration. And like Ryan, I went in feeling very shaky about finances. And I at first kind of took the safe route and did the innovation concentration. And then I actually left that concentration after day 2. And I was like, screw it, I'm going to do the financial concentration. Even if I get like a failing grade, I'm going to do the financial concentration because this is a sandbox environment for me to learn about these topics. And again, I think like I didn't come away being like, I can go by hand do a derivative or a formulation or something, but I came away with a lot of a much better sense of confidence in terms of the vocabulary and talking about, you know, profit and loss statements and, M&A and transactions, things like that. So I think that to me was enormously helpful. And then again, for me, the other value of the MBA is in all of your other classes, you're talking about cases, you're talking about businesses, and you just on your day-to-day basis, unless you're reading Google News every day, only the business section, it's hard to get that much breadth in terms of knowledge of what's going on in the business world.
Great. Amisha?
Yeah, for me, I think my professor did a great job recommending the electives to me because, I mean, even though my undergrad was engineering, taking SQL and databases class during my MBA program definitely helped me brush up those skills. And that is definitely helping me in my current role as a product manager because so many times you have to take decisions based off of data. And if you know SQL, you don't have to go to the data analyst every single time to get data, so that just helps you unblock a lot of things and just be more independent in the company. Other than that, we did have like a core course, information systems, which was basically about what is a scrum team, what are sprints, and all those things are like key terms in product development. So that was definitely one of the first times I had heard about all of these terms which are used in product development, and that definitely helped me in my current role. And then some marketing classes on what is total addressable market. Again, profit loss. How do you decide the pricing of a particular product? What are the different pricing strategies you can think of? So yeah, absolutely. I am definitely using a lot of concepts which I learned during my MBA program. And I think it's all about choosing the right electives because there's so many that the choices are unlimited. So you have to really work with your professors to understand that, okay, this is what I want to do after my MBA program. So these are the classes which are really going to help me.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no, to echo what they were both saying, I think the key of the MBA is I have a firm belief that you don't learn and grow without going through challenges. And whether that's in a relationship that you have, with studies, with work, you really just can't grow without putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And there's nothing more uncomfortable than moving to a foreign country and doing an MBA. Because getting back into the study mode, your brain has to think different. So I would say is, if you're thinking about in my life, and maybe I shouldn't say this is the Gmat club, but in my life, if I want to like excel, an MBA isn't required, but it's a good boot camp way to put yourself in uncomfortable positions a lot. And like Claire was mentioning, I hadn't done mathematics since high school. I avoided it because I'm so bad at it. I didn't put myself in uncomfortable situations in mathematics. And so, yeah, I think think that's the key of, regardless of what you learn and what you retain will be different for every person. It puts you in multiple uncomfortable situations. Because you think about it, after graduating from your undergrad, you kind of coast. You do your job. This is probably why you're looking at an MBA. You kind of feel like you haven't been challenged in a while, so you're not really as happy in your career because you've kind of stopped. And an MBA is a good way to be like, I want to do a big leap and do a big challenge, and then kind of from there progress. So I'd say, yeah, as a general rule, it was a ton of challenges that made me better because I suffered so much. And so that was really valuable. Excel for sure, Claire. We had a guy who was a finance student in our group, and I was like, I didn't even know you could do some of those things in Excel. And then he looked at me, and they weren't even complicated. They were just like certain ways to format and stuff. And I was already blown away. And he was like, oh, well, we're going to be in trouble this term. But yeah, that was really helpful. And then lastly, from owning a marketing business, a lot of the core is really key. Like marketing changes way too often. They're not going to teach you how to do like Facebook ads at an MBA. Like you're not going to learn any of that. You have to just go and do. But they teach you the fundamentals, and it's good to brush those off, to have those baseline fundamentals on creating an actual strategy. Like Amisha was saying, like pricing, all this stuff that despite where you market to someone, that changes all the time. Like now it's Facebook, it's going to be something else tomorrow. The fundamental always will be there. And so it's a good brush up of that to teach you that and kind of rewire your brain.
So I guess starting in reverse order, Ryan, do you feel like overall, going to Erasmus met your expectation? I mean, it sounded like the answer is yes, but just describe more as to whether, probably exceeded it, to be honest with you, the way you're talking about it. But tell me how.
Yeah, you bet. So, originally when I wanted to do it, my plan was to live long-term in Europe. And so for me, it was a gateway into Europe, basically how Claire did it. That was kind of what I wanted to do. And when I went all the way there, moving, the cost of going all that place, in the end, there was a position that just was too good to turn down back in the US that I went to before starting the business. And so a lot of people looked at me after that being like, well, was that a waste? You went all that way and spent all that money? And absolutely not. It was completely worth it. If you're thinking about doing an international MBA and then going back to your home country, it is 110% worth it. And I think the long term is that bond you form. I've never been in the military, but reading kind of people talk about that boot camp and, the person next to you in the line, we go through experiences that no one else will understand. And I could go 15 years without talking to someone in my alumni group, and they'll reach out and immediately, I always tell everyone, we're friends for life. We're family for life, because there's something you go through there that no one else understands. So yeah, it's 100% worth it. And I firmly I believe in the law of reciprocity, the idea that, I'm religious, but you give back to the universe, and the universe will give back to you. And that's so key in the alumni network. And I see that I just constantly, this is why I volunteered to do this. Like, I want to give as much as possible, because I know the next person would do the same for me. And so, yeah, it's 100% worth it. The challenges are worth it, the experience. And so if you're sitting there listening to this and going like, yeah, I'm not, look at me as an example. I didn't get the greatest Gmat score. I didn't do that well. I think I got low 80% on my MBA, but it didn't matter. For me, it was, I wanted to challenge myself and push myself. So you can do it. You think you can because you'll see other people or hear our story. You're seeing us at the end of it. You're not seeing me in the middle of it. So you can do it, and it is possible.
I wanted to ask something, sorry to butt in, but I wanted to ask if you have ever wondered taking master's in more of a specialized course rather than the MBA, or was it something that you thought of doing while, taking your MBA degree? Anyone can answer.
I was regretting my decision only because at that point of time, MBA was not a STEM course. So during my first year of the MBA program, it was not a STEM course. We were in the process of designating it as STEM. So I was like, oh no, I just have 1 year of OPT and I should have gone for master's, which is STEM. But I still had chosen to do MBA just because, I wanted to be more towards the business side of things, understand that more. And thankfully it worked out and we got the STEM designation. But if your MBA is not STEM, as an international student, it's super difficult to find a job. And then, you only have one attempt for your H-1B, and then all those other complications come in. But yeah, other than the visa struggles and the visa issues, I never thought that I want to go for master's.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in. I was at the point where I was looking at a couple of different master's programs kind of throughout after undergrad. I thought about going into doing a master's of food and beverage because I love food and beverages, hence, part of the reason I ended up at Bocconi. And then I also thought about doing the master's in higher education and really kind of doubling down on education. Ultimately, I think the MBA gives you a huge amount of flexibility. And I look back and I think that this was absolutely 100% the right course for me. I think, Paul, I have to jump at your question for a second in terms of meeting at expectations. Obviously, I went in just kind of hoping, on the one hand, just expecting and hoping for an adventure and kind of excited to see where the road would take me. And I came away, just delighted to, on the one hand, with the job outcome, right? I changed countries, I changed functions, I changed industries, which is usually what, they call that a triple jump in the MBA world. But then the experience itself was just outstanding, right? Like I hate to say this now in kind of a COVID world and a COVID existence, but during my MBA, it was right before COVID, and I really was so lucky in that not only did I did Bocconi, but then I did 3 months at Siebes in Shanghai. And ultimately, throughout the course of the MBA, I visited 15 countries, and I went to visit classmates in both South Korea and in South Africa. So it was just such a whirlwind of an experience. I completely just bursted my small St. Louis world open, right? So for me, I have like zero doubt, 100% go for it. I think it is truly a life-changing experience. It's great from a career perspective, but it's great from a personal perspective as well.
Wow. Well, everybody here very much sounds like a raving fan of the program, which is awesome to be incredibly honest with you. So then what is, okay, and I guess I'll ask this question, not trying to be antagonistic, but if there's something you thought you maybe wished you had known before you got to the program, or something you thought the program could improve without throwing anybody under the bus, and I'm sure we all recognize it's difficult to run these programs and meet everybody's expectations, but what would it be? And I guess, Claire, I'll start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. One thing I will say is when I was at Siebes in Shanghai, they offered like a 3-day modeling course, financial modeling course. And I did that and I found it to be extremely, extremely valuable. I don't remember Bocconi having kind of that specific course. So that may be one small comment. I think, so I think that's really the only thing, right? I mean, my Bocconi experience is fabulous. Just as an MBA student in general, if I could go back, I would worry a little bit less. I think I spent so much time being so worried about the outcome and just not enjoying the journey. And that's one small regret I have.
Wow, that's good insight. Misha? Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. For me, I feel like the end thing which everybody wants after an MBA program is a job. So I don't know if that's even possible, but I've seen a couple of, career center representatives giving referrals to their students. So I feel like better tie-ups with, or like better relationships with some of the recruiters in different companies would probably help students a little bit more. So I think that would be the only change which I would want UCR to do, that probably have more connections with recruiters in different companies so that your students can get referrals and then ultimately job. I mean, they would eventually will get job and the process would become a little bit more easier.
Very good.
Yeah, I think for me that this is my background, so very biased. But I was a little disappointed there wasn't really a lot of emphasis on sales or business development. And I don't really know many MBAs that do that at all. Sales is kind of looked down upon, and I can see why, because there's a lot of bad actors. We all have terrible sales experience with someone that just is not being genuine. But I think there's some interesting lessons that I would have loved, maybe if it's just like an emotional intelligence course that would teach you the fundamentals of how to, genuinely work with others to achieve a goal that you need to achieve. Because whether that's sales with a customer or it's with someone else within a division of a company, you want to make sure that you can work with others effectively. And I would have wished for a course. They did have a new course, which was leadership presence. It was taught by the psychology department in concurrence with an acting studio locally there in Rotterdam. And they taught about how to have really good presence when you speak. That class was phenomenal. And I raved about it. I think they're still doing it. But I was like, it was an elective. Like everyone needs to take this course. But I wished a sort of a business development sales focused course, which would have been really effective.
Ryan, really quick, what was that book that you mentioned earlier?
Let me find it. It's the Cultural Map by Meyer. I
Got
will.
it.
It's phenomenal. Let me. Yeah, it's on. You can find it on Amazon, everything else. But yeah, the cultural map. Really fast. Even if you're not even looking about MBA, it really breaks down the different cultures and extensive research on, okay, you can, anytime I was doing a group, I pull up like, okay, what do people from Kenya, they had the score of how they deal with certain situations. Like Americans are very bad, where Misha could probably talk about it. They're not direct at all on like issues. They'll be really nice to you. And then you're like, wait, did I get fired or not? Like it talks about like different cultures and how we deal with things. And so it was really, really interesting.
That's awesome. I think our time is nearing its end. So, Selby, any last?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they kind of covered everything, and I'm sure the MBA was truly worth it with all the points that you guys made. We do have one person who did ask what was Ryan's GMAT score, and Ryan, if you're comfortable saying so, you can.
Oh man, I don't remember. Good question. I don't remember the top of my head because once I took it, I got to be honest, I didn't want to think about it ever again in my life. I do know. I learned Spanish, so I did really good on the English section. Typically, Americans don't do well on that because they don't know their own grammar because our grammar is terrible. Don't get me started on how bad English is. But my math score is my, and I was really worried I wouldn't have got in. And this is actually a good lesson for everyone because the relationship I had with the recruiter, I had taken it and my math score was, in my mind, was not passable. Like it should not have been accepted. And the recruiter basically said, look, first of all, they saw that I took accounting in my undergrad and they saw that I had a good score in that course. And they said, we saw the grit and the focus you had over that 6 weeks to do 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, that we have no concern making it. And again, if you look at the score only, there's no way I would have ever gone to Erasmus at that speed. But because I had the relationship and they saw that I was more than just a score is an important portion of it, but the person is just as important. I was able to overcome that issue that, I probably should have taken a couple more times and got a better score on it. But because they saw my effort, I was able to get around that. So yeah, really the relationship with the recruiter is really important.
Yeah, if you guys really want to know their scores, maybe you should hit them up on LinkedIn. I mean,
yeah,
if you guys are comfortable.
I'd have to dust it off because I think I shredded it when I was done because I was so glad to be done with it.
Nice. But yes, I mean, hopefully we've covered all the points in the 1 hour session. And yes, if you guys do have questions, feel free to message Amisha, Claire, or Ryan on LinkedIn. And I guess they'll be more than happy to answer any further questions. So yes, guys, thank you so much for doing this, coming up here and talking with us. It was lovely to have you all. And thanks once again.
Thank you. Session. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.